Hello everyone. Good to see you. Welcome back to another edition of Dilly's Do-It-Yourself Tutorials. Today we're going to be extending our knowledge of benchmark fractions. In the past couple lessons we've learned how to round fractions off to the nearest whole, half, and zero. Well, today we're going to be doing that as well as adding and subtracting the fractions. This is just a quick way to get an estimate. So let's get started.
All right, before we get started, let's just review some of the guidelines for rounding fractions and mixed numbers to the nearest half. Now, when we say half, we're not literally talking about 1/2. When we say half, we can mean 0, 1/2, or 1 whole. So, the first thing is when you want to round up. If the numerator is almost as large as the denominator, round up to the next whole number. For example, if your fraction is 11/12, 11 is very close to your denominator 12, so that will round up to 1 whole. If you have a mixed number like 1 and 5/6, you can ignore the whole number and focus on the 5/6. Because 5 is very close to 6, and 6/6 equals 1 whole, the 5/6 would round to the next whole. You would then add that on to the other whole number that's there, and that would round to 2. Your answer would be 2. Now, what is the rule for rounding to a half? If the numerator is about half of the denominator, round the fraction to a half. For example, with the fraction 4/7, half of 7 is 3.5. So 4 is very close to half of 7. So that would round to 1/2. In the example 5 and 7/15, you can ignore the 5 and focus on 7/15. Think what half of 15 would be, and that would be 7.5. So 7 is obviously very close, and that would round to a half. And you can then just leave your whole number the same, and your answer would be 5.5. Now, when do you round down? If the numerator is much smaller than the denominator, round the numerator to the previous whole number. Well, if you have an example like 1/7, the 1 is pretty far away from 7. So there is no whole number in front of that, so that would just round to 0. And if you have an example with a whole number, like 21 and 2/12, again, 2 is pretty far away from 12, and it's not very close to the halfway mark either, which would be 6/12. That would just round to 0. And you would just be left with your whole number, which is 21, and that would be your answer. Now, there is one more thing that you need to remember, and that is that the thirds with 1/3 and 2/3, those will always round to 1/2. And that's something that you need to memorize and always use whenever you see it. So the 1/3 and the 2/3 will always round to 1/2. All right, let's move on. Okay, before we go any further, take a second to pause the video and take this little mini quiz and see how you do. You should be choosing whether or not you think each fraction is closer to 0, 1, or 1/2. Go ahead and start the video again once you're done. Hopefully that little review helped you. And now we're going to look at our essential question of the day. How can you make reasonable estimates of sums and differences? So we're going to start with this problem, 2 3/5 minus 1 3/8. In the beginning we can ignore the whole numbers and just focus on the fractions. We're going to compare the 3/5 and decide if it should round to 0, 1/2, or 1. I've drawn out a picture of what 2 3/5 would look like, and I've shaded in 3/5. Now, if you really look at this and you see where the halfway mark is on here, you'll see that this is about halfway. And you can see that 3/5 is very close to half of the whole. So I would round 2 3/5 to 2 1/2. And then let's look at 1 3/8. Well, again, the 3 is very close to where the half would be. If you draw an imaginary halfway mark on your circle, you can see you only need a little bit more for it to be halfway. So this would also round to 1 1/2. So now you can set up your problem as 2 1/2 minus 1 1/2. Your denominators are now the same, and 1/2 minus 1/2 is 0 halves, and 2 minus 1 is 1. Well, when you have 0 halves, you can say that you basically have no halves, so you don't have to write that at all, and your final answer then would be 1. And that is your final answer for that problem. Alright, let's take a look at this example. Here we have an example of 2/5 and 2/3. I've shaded in 2/5, and let's draw an imaginary line of the halfway mark. If we draw it straight down through the halfway, we'll see that 2/5 only needs a little bit more to reach the halfway mark. So we're going to round 2/5 to 1/2. And now let's look at the 2/3. Again, let's draw that imaginary line down, and we'll see again that the 2/3 is very close to 1/2. And as we mentioned in the earlier part of the video, that with the thirds, they're going to round to 1/2. So we're going to round that to 1/2. So now we can go ahead and estimate and add up our fractions. 1/2 plus 1/2. Our denominators are the same. So 1 plus 1 is 2. The denominator stays the same. This is considered an improper fraction, and we know that when the numerator and the denominator are the same, that will equal 1 whole. And that is your final answer. Let's take a look at one more example. Here we have two mixed numbers, 3 7/8 minus 1 1/4. Again, we're going to focus on the 7/8 and 1/4. I've drawn two circles and shaded in 7 of the 8 parts. Here you can see, if you draw a line down the center and looking at the halfway point, that way more than half of the circle has been shaded. So I am going to call this as 1 whole, round it off to 1 whole, and I'm going to add that on to my 3 and make 4. So 3 7/8 will round to 4. Now I'm going to look at my 1 1/4, and I'm going to focus on the 1/4 and draw my halfway point here, and I'm going to say that that is not close to the halfway mark. 1 is not close to the 4. So I am going to round that to 0, and the 1 stays the same. So now I just have 4 minus 1, and my final answer would be 3.
Well, as always, thanks for watching. Hope you found it helpful. Come back anytime, rewatch the video if you need help, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget, leave a comment below and press that heart, give it some love. See you next time.